well. We'll see if we get less viewers. But last. All right, nice. It got small and now it's feeling bigger. That's cool. Thanks everyone for coming. We're gonna sit for a few minutes at the beginning. There are many ways of approaching mindfulness. A common theme is letting things be as they are. And it sometimes feels effortful, but I would say, less and less so as time goes on. It's more like a relaxing of effort. It takes effort to fight against the way things are. The body tightens because we don't want to feel an emotion, a soreness. And allowing it means the body gets to relax. The mind tightens because there's some problem, some unfinished business. And allowing that means the mind gets to relax. So pain doesn't necessarily go away, and problems don't spontaneously get solved. But we learn how to let them be. And start to notice how much relief there is just doing that. And so attention wanders. And the moment we notice that that has happened, we're already back. And even the chattering mind can sort of just let that be. It doesn't need to stop. And it's the acceptance of it in the moment. The knowing that thinking is happening in the moment. That makes it a mindful moment. So strictly speaking, mindfulness isn't a self-improvement task. It's just about knowing what's happening. And the idea is that by knowing what's happening, well, I guess things do change, and maybe change for the better, but not because we're trying to make anything different, because we give up trying to make things different. We choose to take a perspective that just witnesses and lets things be, and it's not all that's needed always, but it does a lot of good in a lot of different areas of life. So, it takes different forms depending on the moment. Sometimes it's just really interesting to get into the textures of breathing, if that's the meditation practice that you're doing. It's a very simple way to be present without having a difficult thing to focus on, without it having to be an intense emotion or something like that. And we just get really involved in the clarity aspect. So this is an experience that's coming through our senses, the breath. And maybe it's not so hard to let it be. And we can really get invested in the fine details, the texture, the starting and stopping of different points of sensation. And in that way, we're cultivating a certain aspect of the ability to be present and observe. And then in other moments, maybe we are dealing with something that's hard to feel or confusing to think about. And it's not so much clarity that is getting cultivated in that moment, but more acceptance, sort of leaning on that piece. It's a moment to strengthen that muscle, the muscle of letting something be that's hard. The clarity piece and the acceptance piece or acceptance could also be referred to as equanimity. If you've meditated before, maybe you heard that word. They're components of what it means to be mindful. And even in moments of pleasure, clarity or acceptance could be a really important element, because any good feeling is going to go away. And there's as much resistance to the ending of something that's pleasant as there is to the beginning of something that's not. So all of these tools are useful. All of these two different aspects are both useful. Lately for me, I've been looking at complex aspects of my psychology that come up kind of as a bundle all at once, watching how I am in life. Because meditation kind of inclines us to pay more attention to how we are and how the world is in life. We're more present. Start to see things that are yucky or painful or awkward. For me, it's often awkward. It's socially awkward and uncomfortable. There's all these flavors of social experience that I would want to be different, or think that they think they should be different, or they don't feel good on some somatic body level. And even that stuff, maybe in the moment I'm in a conversation and a comment doesn't land right, or I just don't feel understood, or I can't understand the person I'm speaking to. There's only so much clarity we can have out and about, in the middle of a conversation. There's only so much acceptance that might be available in the moment, still trying to dialogue, can't drop in and close my eyes and sit down and turn off the sounds of the restaurant. And then there's sort of a meta acceptance of all that becomes available. So that even in a moment of overwhelm, it feels like, no, this is too much sensory data, not enough time, too much intensity. And we can start to feel into a way that even that is okay. It's like, it's some sort of okay that's outside of whether it's okay or not. So today, we're going to go on a little sensory tour in meditation. We'll start focusing on the breath because it tends to be relatively neutral and easy to stay with, since the sensations are usually pretty available. And then we'll move to body sensations in general, just tracking those sensations. A little broader, a little more diffuse, a lot of more variety in terms of the flavors, so the challenge goes up a little bit. Then we'll move into including sound, and this is pending change. I might change it in the moment, but that's my plan. So we're widening the focus so that it just becomes a little bit more challenging and full of variety, and then a little bit more so. And then we'll end up with whatever comes, including thinking, including anything, any emotion, sounds, everything, so that we are not restricting our area of focus at all. And in that way, we're sort of having a simulation of this could be any moment in life. Thoughts are coming, sounds are coming, and start to feel like, how does this incline our senses that we might tap into when we're not sitting with our eyes closed? And you can always step down if you feel like, oh my God, I'm just lost in thought for 5 minutes. You could step down to one of those simpler levels. You could come back to the breath or come back to the body to make it a little simpler for yourself. What else? I think that's all for now. Does that make sense as a notion? And I'll talk us through it as we go. Anyone need to stretch before we sit for 30 minutes? I'm going to stand up for a second. One last thing I'll say before we get started. When I'm really paying attention and looking at the complexity of the whole thing, the complexity of what a human being is, or how I seem to be, the notion of actually self-improvement, the way that I might think of it, it doesn't make any sense. It's way too complicated of a system to try to fix it. So I'm left just wanting to figure out how to love it all. So if you get into a grimy moment in meditation, it can be an opportunity to just see what it's like to introduce a sort of acceptance that takes the flavor of love and kindness. So let's try it out. It was nice to start out just settling the body, finding a balance between uprightness and relaxation. basically you want the body to be as relaxed as possible, but also balanced, so you're not using a lot of muscle tension to hold yourself in place. And alert, so whatever it takes to stay alert. And that might change from day to day or moment to moment. For now, we'll just scan through the body, paying attention for any unnecessary muscle tension and releasing it to whatever extent you can. So starting at the top of the head, relaxing the scalp, the brow, the face, the jaw, balancing the head, relaxing the shoulders, softening the arms, just letting the breath move naturally through the chest and the belly. Feeling the weight of the upper body pressing down, points of contact on your chair or cushion. Softening into that pressure. Relaxing the hips, the legs, the feet. And we're going to start out with some breath awareness. So picking a place where you can feel your breath clearly, the sensations of breathing. If for whatever reason the sensations of breathing are not comfortable for you to pay attention to, you can always just pay attention to the sensations in your hands instead. I'll assume we're going to work with the breath. So finding a spot where you can feel your breath clearly. More obvious sensations are usually easier to focus on. Subtle sensations will be more challenging, so you can pick your level of challenge. Narrow area is also easier generally. A wider area will be more challenging. So settling on a spot and breathing naturally. Focusing on the sensations, feeling the sensations moment by moment. And we'll use a counting strategy just as a concentration aid. So at the end of each out-breath, we'll increment the count, starting at 1, going up to 10, and then beginning again at 1. So following the sensations of the in-breath, the sensations of the out-breath, and then counting 1, following the in-breath and the out-breath, and counting 2, and so on like that all the way up to 10, and then beginning again at 1, and continuously repeating the count, and focusing as much attention as possible on the sensations themselves, just a little left over for the counting. So as I mentioned at the beginning, if you notice your attention has wandered, maybe you wind up at 17 or 28, no big deal. The moment you notice that, you're already back. So just pick up again at 1. That is the practice, coming back over and over again, as kindly and patiently as you can. Essentially, being present is focusing on what's coming into the senses. That's what's happening now. So in the case of breathing, we're focusing on the touch sense, specifically the sensations of breathing. So we're not thinking about breathing so much, we're feeling what it feels like moment after moment. The texture, the changes, the gaps. No way that it's supposed to be. It's just how does it happen to be right now? How does it feel? So we'll set down the breath now, but keep the same basic approach. Now letting attention wander anywhere within sensations in the body. So basically the sense of touch, temperature, points of contact, gravity, breathing, digestion, aches and pains, any sensation that happens to arise in the body, just feeling it, allowing it. Clarity and acceptance. Some sensations tend to have big stories attached to them, particularly uncomfortable ones. The mind gets going about what it means, what I have to do. And this is how the system switches from just being with it to how do I fix it? But we spend a lot of our time problem solving, so it's natural for that to happen here. And here we're practicing just being, so letting the thoughts go on in the background and just focusing on the sensation. Letting each sensation arise and pass in its own time. Now we're going to widen the scope of attention even further, allowing attention to move freely between sensations and external sounds. And with sounds, it's the same general idea as with body sensations, except we're focusing on the hearing sense instead of the feeling sense. We're listening to the texture of the sound, the volume, position in space, the gaps between sounds. Really listening closely and cultivating an allowance, permission. Everything comes and goes on its own. So it might take some effort to set down a train of thought and hold the attention on feeling and hearing. But for a moment, let's just focus on the effortlessness of this. Notice how hearing just happens. We don't have to try to hear. Notice how feeling just happens. Even resistance or confusion or sleepiness, they just happen. It's not anything that you did. Even thinking just happens. Sometimes it seems deliberate, but certainly not always. So at this point, we'll widen attention to include everything, including even thinking. And you can experience thoughts just like any other sense experience. Internal talk, sounds in the head, in the mind. It's auditory. And internal images in the mind, visual information. And just another flavor of seeing and hearing. feeling, hearing, thinking, all just happening. Even your reactions to the meditation, your internal monologue, just happening. And someone, something is witnessing all of this. Some part of you that is separate from the thinking, separate from the feeling. Who is that? And for the last minute, we'll just drop everything. No need to maintain a technique. No need to pay attention. No effort to start or stop anything. Just coasting, being. So as we move into talking, nice to feel into how it might be possible to not have to let go of some aspect of what you just experienced. So maybe there's different kinds of sensory data coming in now, but it doesn't actually interfere with awareness. It doesn't interfere with the ability to be mindful. Any questions about the guidance, like points of confusion?
I have a very logistical question. For the breathing, I wasn't clear on, are you breathing in the same number that you're breathing out?
That was the way I guided it, yeah. So you only increment at the end of every out breath. But you can count twice as often if you want to. So each half breath could be a different number.
Oh. And then up to 20?
Up to 10 was what I suggested.
10.
Yeah.
So 20 at one point, okay.
Huh. But yeah, it's fine to do it however you want.
And then once you hit 10, you can kind of decrease the count to 1, and then you start at 1 again.
You start at 1 again was the way I guided it. But again, if you want to count backwards, that is slightly more challenging from a concentration standpoint. So if you found just counting in one direction easy, then the next step would be count up and down, because it's a little bit harder to remember where you were if you're doing that. So it takes a stronger concentration to do that.
And then again, when you hit 10, you start with 1.
That was the way I guided it.
2, okay.
Yeah, so in and out, and then you count 1, and then in and out, and then you count 2, and then in and out, you count 3. ... In and out, you count 9. In and out, you count 10. In and out, you count 1. In and out, you count 2. Yeah, like that.
The idea is to focus on the counting and on the feeling? Or,
For the breath meditation?
yeah.
Yeah, the idea is as much attention as you can keep on the sensations themselves
While doing the counting.
while maintaining the count, yeah.
So it's almost like a twofold concentration test.
Yeah, basically.
Wait, that's confusing because it's hard enough for me to concentrate on one of those things. And to do them simultaneously. I'm like a step backwards here.
Okay, so, more challenging doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, but the idea is, if we're just focusing on the sensations of breathing, first of all, trust yourself. If that's your preference, it's okay to go with that. What sometimes happens is people are just focusing on the sensations of breathing and they space out and they don't realize that they've spaced out because there isn't a feedback mechanism that's saying 17, 18, 19 that makes you realize how long you've been gone or if you've been gone at all. So that's what the counting provides. And it's for you to decide if you want that additional support or not.
Can you count breaths? Sorry.
Can you count?
Well, you could count like not breaths, but never mind. Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, I don't understand. Anything else technically?
I was finding that with I haven't done a lot of meditation, and what I've done is a lot shorter than that last one.
Uh-huh.
I was finding that when it's short, I can kind of breathe through any discomfort.
Yeah.
Or I can kind of think about it and then it goes away. I was having a hard time with the longer. Is it okay to just shift or I don't know. I mean, it was like I was trying to
Hold super still.
Or not so super still, but kind of pay attention to the pain, but then not think about the pain, not go on to some spin about oh, my hip is hurting me right now, some conversation in my head, but then it wasn't going away. So then what do you do when you're going to me, but what do you...
Yeah. I get what you're asking. Well, there's benefit to shifting and there's benefit to not shifting.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of pick. We're going for measured doses of discomfort so that it's within the range where we can actually work with it and develop these skills. If it's torture, it's not going to be useful practice. And if it's super, super blissful and easy, we might be also missing something potentially. So you might sit with it for an extra 10 seconds past what you think you can, and then shift in a mindful way where you're actually conscious of your movements as you're adjusting. Or just shift right away. That's also a way to go. And if you're gonna be still with it, there's benefit to focusing on it the way that you were describing, like just feeling the sensations can sometimes provide relief because the story can make it a bigger deal than the sensations themselves. You can also deliberately focus away, like focusing on sound or a neutral part of the body. So benefit to shifting, benefit to not, benefit to focusing on, benefit to focusing away. It's like a choose your own adventure. Other technical stuff? Okay, so I really like leaving time in this class for us to each of us to just share if there's anything we want to share. So this is that time. And what it means is we'll go around the room. If you have something you want to voice, either an experience you had in meditation, experience you're having in life, how your week was going, just so that each of us gets to be heard. Now is your chance, and we'll have about a minute or two apiece. You're welcome to pass if you want to. As we're moving through the room, a few invitations. One is to speak from our own direct experience rather than offering advice or trying to solve someone else's problem, because that can sometimes make it feel unsafe. So that's one piece. And also, this is an opportunity to start to extend mindfulness into the relational field. So as you're speaking, can you track your emotional experience? As you're listening, can you track what it feels like to be in the field of the person who's sharing? And it's all an opportunity for us to practice. That make sense? Anyone want to start? Yeah, go for it.
On that note, I find that sound is my main, like it takes over, or it has its own intensity, I guess, is what like it's very clear and focused, and I find myself, I don't, when I let myself just stay with the sounds, far away, close one ear, the other ear, back, it plays, I don't get the same chatter or distraction or shift off of that. Whereas feeling, like, that's very, very difficult. Like, things feel almost numb that way. Like they're totally kind of opposites. It was interesting there where the way you brought everything to a point of letting it all kind of come together and like a stew, and then but I kept finding that the sound
Would stand out.
Yeah, and then, of course, it's hard to stay out of why. Why is it like that? Like, why am I sound so hyper vigilant about? Because that's what it almost feels. That's what it seems like. It's like sensitivity to that. Is that? Because in my practice, I find myself floating. Like I might start at my breath, and then it's just chaos up there. And then I find myself. But then there's a break. The break is I have to stay on that. I have to stay with the critic or the critique is no, stay with
The hard thing.
the breath, because that's what you started at. You're going to start, you're going to stay there until I'm sitting here putting my finger. But yeah, I mean, it's like it's kind of the guiding that you gave. It was like you gave permission to just kind of go where you ended up, and then I got comfortable in that observation. Anything else? Yeah.
Are you wanting feedback about all that, or just wanting to share?
I was sharing, I guess, if there's feedback, I appreciate that.
It's all fine, I guess is what I would be inclined to say. Yeah. I like to encourage people to find the practices that are interesting because it's so hard to keep a meditation practice going as it is. And if we make it another opportunity to like lecture ourselves about how we're doing it wrong, it's just all the more difficult to keep it going. So if sound is easy to focus on, if it's interesting to you, then it's a nice resource to know about. And if feeling is something you want to encourage and cultivate, then it might even be possible to combine the two. Start with the easier one maybe, and then switch to the more difficult one, something like that. But it's all valuable for sure. Can't go wrong too easily. Want to pick a direction? To go around the circle? Or popcorn style?
I mean,
Yeah, do it. Go for it.
I'm a parent of a 5 and almost 6-year-old, and I've been practicing mindfulness in my parenting for a long time in terms of letting him have his feeling state and keeping myself out of that state. It's very hard when you're close with someone to not kind of make it your feeling. And I've been pretty successful at it. I'm pretty good at it when I'm having a good day and when I have my cup is full. But I'm realizing I'm very new to meditation. That it also can be body work, and I hadn't really connected that before. Like mostly I'm kind of thinking about it. Like, okay, he's having this feeling, it's not my feeling, I can be supportive and be here, but I don't have to fix it, I don't have to change it. But I'm realizing with this practice that we just did that I can also make it more physical, and I think that will help me. Because I know it lives in my body too. That tension of like, whoa, that person's going through something. How do I stop it? You know. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, huge.
Harder.
Yeah, more uncomfortable.
But a good tool for realizing that that's another element of it. It's like, wow, I'm feeling this in my belly. Feeling this in my body.
Yeah, so glad to hear that. That's really cool. Anyone else?
Sure. The sound meditation was really interesting for me too. My ears ring all the time, and my ears like hear pitches differently. So I spend a lot of time, I guess, like trying to ignore those sensations. I'm also like physically pretty sensitive to noise, and work in a pretty noisy place, so I spend a lot of my time like kind of turning away from sound. And so it was interesting and nice to be able to like really, really focus on it and kind of provide a foil to how I normally go about my week, and to still feel relaxed at the same time. Just like not be overwhelmed by it, but to be okay with it. It was nice.
Nice.
I got really caught up in meditation with like the relationship between like where you focus and how you feel and how you think. So like I was thinking about my lungs, how am I breathing, and then I would feel differently maybe than if I thought about like my hands or something. And then I was thinking about, then of course how you feel is gonna really affect like what sort of thoughts are bumping in your head. And that's something I spent time thinking about. So I don't know if that's maybe completely not what I was supposed to be doing, but it was something that I spent a lot of time doing during meditation.
If you're watching the way the system ping-pongs back off of itself, thinking causes feeling, causes thinking in a different way, causes a different kind of feeling. That's useful, for sure, yeah. Thinking about it conceptually, like, oh, this is interesting, I wonder what it means about being a human. And if it's all a narrative that's happening, then maybe that's not as useful. But if it's actually the noticing that that is happening and witnessing the way that it happens, how the senses flow from one to another, from thinking to feeling, all that, that's quite useful. So yeah, maybe not explicitly what we were, well, it sort of was what we were doing, or maybe a place that it could go. Yeah.
Okay, now I'll share that. I made a point of not going the first floor out of my way. That's usually do. That was quite awesome. I haven't meditated in years. Years. Yeah. Not as hard. I mean, I was definitely doing the, you know, the, oh my god, my back hurts. Oh my god, I'll just really quietly just go, you know. So I shifted a lot, but it was nice to notice and then be mindful in, you know, so that I enjoyed that. And then just the saying, you know, you're only conscious of what you pay attention to, because I found myself going, I have an itch, I want to itch it, I will not itch it, and it was getting really hard, and then you were like, oh, listen to the sound, and then I didn't itch, and I had 2 really bad itches, and it's the first time I've ever not itched, the itch, which is interesting.
And it just goes away.
It just went away. So it's only what you, the whole thing of what you pay attention to was all about. So that was very cool. What you just said about, you know, and then focusing on different things and stuff goes away. And you're, in many, I guess I can read that. I'm reading that in many different ways.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. I haven't meditated really in years. So.
Wow, good work.
Very cool. Yeah.
That was 32 minutes worth.
Was it?
33. Sometimes it feels really fast, sometimes it feels really slow.
That felt really fast for me.
Cool. Nice.
Definitely a lot of sounds here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I found myself enjoying the sounds a little too much. They were bringing nostalgia, like the airplane for some reason, and then there was some birds. And I was like, oh, the birds. And then I wasn't sure whether that was what I was supposed to be doing. That joyful, like, oh, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, again, it's like, that's okay. If you can stay in the direct sensing experience, that's ideal. So when nostalgia comes, what's happening? It's sound causes a wave of emotion, maybe. It's a physical sensation in the body, perhaps. Maybe some imagery in the mind, so you're seeing and you're feeling, and then maybe thinking a word thought about that, so then there's like hearing thought. So if you can stay with the sensing experience as it's unfolding, yeah, anything is fair game. That's cool. People think that they're not supposed to enjoy meditation sometimes.
Well, I think I was afraid I was going to go off on a tangent. Like, oh, I wonder what kind of bird that is. Is it pretty? Or like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or like start thinking about a memory.
Yeah. And in a way that can be, it can be more challenging to have that be a mindful moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really reintroduce the love or kindness piece during that meditation. Sometimes that just comes from this sort of practice, and sometimes it doesn't. So that's a whole other world of practice that falls under the mindfulness umbrella. Sometimes it's called loving kindness. In the Buddhist tradition, it's called metta. And it's a useful counterpoint for what we're doing, because often what we're doing causes discomfort, or it causes us to notice discomfort that was there all along. And there's a reason why we don't like to pay attention to that stuff. Because it's uncomfortable, it's hard. It's not our inclination. So when we start turning toward things that are unpleasant, the whole loving kindness world of practices is a really nice counterbalance for that. How do we bring in the kindness, the compassion that is necessary to make it feel safe enough to be with all that stuff? So for another day, maybe for next week, we'll dig into that. And if you're really dying to practice that way, I'm happy to send out some recordings of that. Let me know. We're going to wrap up because we're out of time. We meet here every week from 6 to 7:15. I'm teaching a day-long also on mindfulness and creativity on the 26th, which is a Saturday, 10 to 4, including a lunch break. I don't think it's going to be a silent day. It'll be a combination of periods of meditation and maybe some writing exercises, some partner exercises. Whatever you make in your life, whether it is computer programs or art or music, or you're starting a business or something, the idea here is to connect mindfulness to the activity of creating.
What, can you describe what the day might?
What it'll...
Well, they'll be really long, like 2-hour sittings, or is
No.
That
No.
sounds amazing.
We're talking like 20 or 30 minute sit, writing exercise, little Q&A, 20-minute sit, maybe like a partner exercise where you tell someone else to like, here's my project, here are my plans, lunch break, and then more of the same, something like that. Yeah.
What day is that?
26th of May.
The next Saturday, right?
May.
Of May. Yeah. So
May.
next Saturday plus a month.
But is it on a Saturday?
It's on a Saturday, yeah. And the last thing I'll say is, as I mentioned at the beginning, this class is donation-based, and I pay rent to Santa Monica Yoga. So if you can afford to donate, the suggested donation is $15. It helps me pay the rent. If you can't afford to donate, I want you to come regardless. So those of us who can donate, pay for those of us who can't. If you can pay more than $15 and that feels comfortable to you, thank you in advance. I can take cash over there in that bowl. There are $5 bills if you need change. I can also take credit cards, Venmo, PayPal, and checks.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jason.
Good work.